She donated blood after a car crash. The Mafia boss demanded to meet his savior. The highway outside Chicago was a ribbon of black glass, slick with a hard November rain. Lorenzo Moretti, secured in the back of the armored sedan, was not looking at the weather. He was looking at the quarterly reports for the shipping terminals, the blue-white light of his tablet illuminating the hard planes of his face. He despised this part of the business, the numbers, the legitimate fronts, but it was necessary. The silence in the car was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers and the low, professional murmur of his driver speaking to the follow car. It happened so fast it defied thought. A sound like a cannonball striking steel, the world-bending shriek of metal. The armored truck that had been tailgating them for the last mile slammed into their rear quarter panel, executing a perfect pit maneuver at 80 miles an hour. The sedan, 3 tons of reinforced steel and ballistic glass, spun like a child's toy. Lorenzo felt the sickening lurch of physics taking over. The car went broadside, and the second truck, which had been waiting in the median, T-boned them. The impact was catastrophic. Lorenzo was thrown against his restraints, his head snapping back, connecting with the door frame with a sickening crack. The sedan flipped, once, twice. It skidded on its roof, a screaming, sparking wreck, before coming to rest in the muddy ditch, inside. There was only darkness, the smell of gasoline, and the sound of the rain hissing on hot, twisted metal. Lorenzo Moretti was still breathing, but only just. His driver and bodyguard were gone. He tried to move his left arm and felt a pain so sharp it blinded him. Then, nothing. He was drowning in his own blood when his men from the follow car, their faces pale and furious after the firefight, finally cut him out of the wreckage. He's breathing, but barely. Get us to the county, now. Forget the private clinic. It's too far. They piled into the surviving SUV, tearing up the shoulder of the highway. Sirens they were not authorized to have screaming into the night. The emergency room at Chicago County Hospital was a special kind of hell on a Tuesday night. The surgeon, a woman running on 48 hours of no sleep and lukewarm coffee, took one look at the x-rays and the blood-drenched gurney, multiple internal injuries, severe cranial trauma, massive hemorrhaging. His pressure is non-existent, she barked at a nurse. He's AB negative. Get the blood bank on the line. If we don't get 30 units of AB-neg plasma and whole blood into him in the next 20 minutes, he's dead. Go. In the hallway, Lorenzo's chief advisor, Rocco, a man whose tailored suit was now stained with his boss's blood, grabbed the surgeon's arm. You don't understand. You have to save him. The surgeon ripped her arm free. I understand perfectly. His blood type is one of the rarest on Earth. We have 2 units on hand. He needs 30. Unless a miracle walks through that door, your boss is going to die on my table. The miracle was sitting in the same waiting room, holding a cheap, beige-colored cloth to her right hand. Eliana Green had been waiting for 3 hours. A pressurized coffee pot at the diner where she worked had exploded, sending scalding water and grounds across her arm. It was a second-degree burn, painful and blistering, but in the triage of County's ER, it put her at the bottom of the list. She was so tired her bones ached. It was a deeper exhaustion than the double shifts. It was the soul-deep weariness of grief. Her younger brother, Liam, had died in this very hospital 6 months ago. He had insurance, but it was bad insurance, the kind that covered nothing. The debt collectors had already seized their mother's car. Now they were coming for the apartment. A nurse burst through the doors, her face frantic. We have a Code 1 trauma, bleeding out. We need AB-negative blood, stat, anybody. Eliana looked up, her gaze dull. The noise of the ER faded. Liam had given her a keychain when she got her driver's license, a little plastic tag. On it, in chipped red letters, it said, in case of emergency, I am AB negative. He'd had the same one, the rarest blood. She stood up slowly, the nurse, already moving on, almost missed her. I am, Eliana said, her voice hoarse, barely a whisper. I'm AB negative. The nurse's head snapped around. She grabbed Eliana by her good arm. Are you sure? Have you donated before? Yes, I'm sure. Forget the burn, the nurse yelled to a passing orderly. Get her to the blood lab. Now. Eliana didn't protest. She let herself be led, pushed onto a donation cot, and felt the familiar sharp prick of the needle. She watched her own blood, dark and vital, fill the plastic bag. She didn't ask who it was for. She didn't care. She was just empty. She had failed to save Liam from the slow, crushing death of medical debt. Maybe she could save this stranger from a faster one. She was discharged an hour later, her arm bandaged, her head dizzy. She took the late-night bus back to her neighborhood, the donation cookie still untouched in her coat pocket. When she got to her apartment building, the cold hit her first, followed by the sick clench of fear. A bright pink piece of paper was taped to her door, the ink bleeding slightly from the rain. Final notice of eviction. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises. Eliana leaned her forehead against the cheap, painted wood. She couldn't cry. She was too tired to cry. She unlocked the 3 deadbolts and stepped inside the cold, dark apartment. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a cracked screen relic, a text message. It was from Travis, her ex-boyfriend, a man who still thought she owed him something. I know you got paid today. Eliana. You need to pay me what you owe. I'm coming by tomorrow for that laptop. If you're not there, I'll let myself in. She slid down the wall, pulling her knees to her chest, and finally let out a single, soundless sob. Miles away. Lorenzo Moretti survived the surgery. He lay in a private, guarded wing of the hospital, machines breathing for him, his body a roadmap of sutures and bandages. He remained unconscious for 4 days. Rocco sat by his bedside, never leaving. On the second day, he made a call to a hospital administrator whose child's gambling debts the Moretti family quietly held. The donor, Rocco said, his voice low. The AB negative. I need a name. That is highly illegal. Mr. Gallo. It violates every privacy policy. It is a matter of family gratitude. We want to send a thank you, a generous one. Find the name, or I will find your son's bookie. He had the name an hour later. Eliana Green, 26. Waitress at the Sunrise Diner. No criminal record. No connections. Just a mountain of medical debt from a deceased brother. Nobody. On the 5th day, Lorenzo's eyes opened. They were cloudy at first, then sharp. Rocco jerked awake from his chair. Boss, he breathed, relief flooding his face. Lorenzo's throat was raw from the intubation. He tried to speak. Rocco gave him a chip of ice. The ambush, Lorenzo rasped. We're handling it. The Valenkos. How? Lorenzo motioned to his own broken body. Rocco explained. The crash, the surgery, the blood. You were lucky, boss. A 1 in a million chance. A donor was right there in the ER. Same blood type. Lorenzo was silent. He was a man who hated chance. He hated luck. He hated debts he did not ask for. His world was built on control, on leverage, on transactions. This was chaos. Who? Rocco hesitated. A civilian, a woman, Eliana Green. She's clean, a waitress, struggling, nobody. Lorenzo's dark eyes fixed on the ceiling. Nobody saved my life. He pushed himself up on one elbow, ignoring the white-hot pain that shot through his ribs. Find her. Bring her to me. Rocco stood, alarmed. Boss, it's not safe. We haven't dealt with the Valenkos. We don't know who else is watching. We can't bring a civilian into this. Let me send her a check, a big one. She'll disappear. No. Lorenzo's voice was quiet, but it was the voice that ended arguments and lives. A check does not settle this. I will see the person whose blood is in my veins. I will look her in the eye, find her, bring her to my home, tonight. Eliana was in the middle of the lunch rush, her burned arm throbbing, her feet aching, her mind numb with the eviction notice. Order up, Eliana, table 4 needs coffee. Where's that BLT, Sal? The owner yelled. She was balancing 3 plates on her good arm when the bell over the diner door jingled. The whole diner went quiet. 2 men stood in the doorway. They wore black wool coats, perfectly tailored, that probably cost more than her brother's entire hospital stay. They were not here for coffee. They scanned the room, their eyes cold, missing nothing. They spotted her, the only waitress with a fresh bandage. They walked directly to her. Eliana's heart hammered against her ribs. Was this about Travis? Had he sent them? The taller one, with a streak of silver in his dark hair. stopped in front of her. "Eliana Green?" His voice was polite, but hard as marble. "Yes," she whispered. The plate suddenly felt very heavy. "Our employer wishes to thank you for your recent donation. He requests your presence for dinner." She stared. "What? I'm working. I can't—" The man looked past her, at Sal, who was frozen by the register. "She's feeling unwell. She's leaving for the day. You will compensate her for the full shift." Sal just nodded, wiping his hands on his apron. "I don't understand," Eliana said, her voice shaking. "Who is your employer? He prefers to introduce himself." The man gently, but irresistibly, took the plates from her arm. "Please, your coat." It was not a request. It was a summons. 20 minutes later, she was in the back of a black sedan, moving silently through the city. She was still wearing her polyester uniform, smelling faintly of fried onions and coffee. They hadn't let her go home to change. They didn't go to a restaurant. They pulled into the private subterranean garage of the most expensive high-rise in Chicago. An elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Eliana stepped out and forgot to breathe. The room was vast, bigger than her entire apartment building floor. One wall was pure glass, looking down on the city lights like a scattering of diamonds. The air was still and warm. He was standing by the window, his back to her. He was dressed not in a suit, but in dark trousers and a simple black cashmere sweater. He turned, and her breath caught. It was him. Lorenzo Moretti. She knew the face from the newspapers, the whispers about the Chicago outfit, but the pictures did no justice to the reality. He was paler than she expected, and thinner from the hospital stay, a fresh scar, angry and red, cut down from his left temple, narrowly missing his eye, pulling the skin tight. He looked like a fallen angel, beautiful and broken and terrifying. "Miss Green," he said. His voice was low, a gravelly rasp. "Thank you for coming." The two men who brought her melted away. A table was set for two, with white linens and sparkling crystal. "Please, sit." She sat, perching on the edge of the velvet chair. She was horribly aware of her cheap, worn-out shoes on the polished marble floor. A man in a white jacket poured her water from a glass bottle. Lorenzo sat opposite her. He did not move. He did not smile. He just watched her. It was the most intense scrutiny she had ever felt. More intimidating than Travis's rage, more clinical than any doctor. "They tell me," he began, "that I would be dead if not for you." Eliana swallowed. "I was just there. They said they needed blood. I had the right kind. And you just gave it?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement of disbelief. Yes, food was placed before them. Something delicate with fish and herbs. Eliana couldn't imagine eating. Her stomach was a cold knot. Lorenzo picked up his fork but didn't eat. He just continued to watch her, his eyes probing. "Why were you at the hospital, Eliana?" "I burned my hand, at work. The coffee pot." She held up her bandaged arm. His gaze flickered to the bandage, then back to her face. "And they let you donate. With an injury?" "It was an emergency. They said you were dying." He leaned forward slightly. The movement was predatory, curious. "You are not from this city." "No, I grew up in Wisconsin. I came here for my brother. He was sick." "Was?" "He passed away." 6 months ago." The words came out, flat and dead. Lorenzo's expression did not change, but something in his eyes deepened. He saw the grief she lived in. He saw the exhaustion. He saw the thinness of her coat and the fear she was trying to hide. He saw the eviction notice tucked in her pocket as if it were written on her forehead. "You saved my life," he said again, quieter this time. "That creates a debt." "I don't want anything," she said quickly, too quickly. "I didn't do it for money." "I know," he said. And she knew that he did. This, more than anything, seemed to fascinate him. He was a man who lived in a world of transactions, of favors and violence. Her simple, empty act of humanity was a language he didn't speak. She finally found the courage to look at him, really look at him. At the scar, the tiredness in his eyes, the immense, dangerous power he held in stillness. She felt a strange, terrifying pull. He was the most dangerous man she had ever met. And for the first time in months, her hands had stopped shaking. She put her napkin down. I should go. I have to be somewhere." He knew she was lying, but he nodded. "Rocco will have you driven home." He stood as she stood. He walked her to the private elevator, the silence stretching between them. She stepped in. Desperate to be back in her own cold, miserable apartment, the doors began to slide shut. "Eliana!" She turned. He was holding out a small, incredibly thick black card. On it, a single phone number was embossed in silver. "I do not like debts," he said, his voice flat, "and I do not like chance. You are now part of my life." She looked at the card, then at his face. "Take it." She reached out and took it. Her fingers, calloused from work, brushed him. His skin was warm, electric. "If anything happens," he said, and his voice was no longer curious. It was a command. "If your ex-boyfriend comes near you, if your landlord threatens you, if you so much as spill coffee on yourself again, anything." His dark eyes held hers, and she knew he meant it. "Call me." The elevator doors slid shut, sealing her in. Normalcy was a phantom. Eliana tried to grasp it, but her hands passed right through. After the night at the penthouse, her cold water apartment felt like a cage. The pink eviction notice was still on the door, a glaring wound. She tore it down, her hands shaking, but the sticky residue of the tape remained. She went to work at the diner. The smell of frying bacon, which had always been a simple comfort, now just smelled of grease. The clatter of plates was too loud. The customers seemed dull, their complaints about coffee temperature petty and small. She had sat at a table worth more than her entire life, across from a man who commanded silence just by breathing. Now she was refilling ketchup bottles and wiping down counters. The black card Lorenzo had given her was a weight in her pocket. It felt heavier than her keys, heavier than her wallet. It was a small, sharp-edged promise of power that terrified her. She would look at the single, embossed number and feel a lurch in her stomach. It was a door she could not unsee. She resolved to throw it away, to forget the man with the scarred face and the impossibly dark eyes. She owed him nothing. He owed her nothing. The debt was paid. He had said so. But she couldn't throw it away. She tucked it inside her cracked phone case. Behind the cheap plastic, a secret. Life was a blur of double shifts. She was trying to scrape together enough money for a deposit on a new, cheaper, more miserable apartment before the 72 hours on the eviction notice ran out. She was exhausted, living on stale coffee and the adrenaline of fear. She came home late on a Thursday, after a 16-hour shift. The street lamp on her corner was broken, plunging the walkway to her building into near-total darkness. She fumbled for her keys, her shoulders aching. She didn't need the keys. The door to her apartment was open, just a few inches, a dark, yawning gap. Eliana froze. Her blood ran cold, colder than the November air. "Travis," she whispered. She pushed the door open. The metallic click of the broken lock echoed in the hallway. He hadn't just picked the lock, he had shattered the jamb. The apartment was destroyed. It wasn't just a robbery, it was a violation. The cushions on her threadbare sofa were slashed. The few pictures she had of Liam were torn from the walls, their cheap frames crushed on the floor. Her mattress was flipped. Her drawers were emptied. He had taken the two things she couldn't replace, her laptop, which held every photo she had left of her brother, and her phone. She sank to her knees in the wreckage. He had even taken the phone case, and with it, the black card. But he had missed the card. In his clumsy rage, it had fallen from the case. She saw it, half hidden under the overturned sofa, a sharp black rectangle against the dusty floor. She crawled over and picked it up. She sat there for a long time, in the cold, violated silence of her home, holding that card. The tears wouldn't come. It was a deeper feeling, a hollow, burning rage. She went to the police precinct. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sick, greenish glow. The officer at the desk looked bored. She explained, her voice trembling, about the break-in, the threats, her ex-boyfriend. The officer sighed, clicking his pen. "So you think it was him? Did you see him? He texted me. He threatened me. He took my laptop. It's a domestic issue. Miss, You'll have to file a report for the stolen items for your insurance. Here's a form." "You're not going to find him?" she asked, her voice cracking. "He kicked in my door. He threatened me. Unless you have a restraining order or there's evidence of physical assault, you just have to fill out the form. He'll probably show up in a day or two wanting to apologize. They always do." Eliana looked at the officer. At the smudged "Protect and Serve" poster on the wall behind him, the police would do nothing. She was alone. The law was just a stack of forms. She walked out of the precinct, the useless paper clutched in her hand. She walked 3 blocks to a payphone, the kind that smelled of urine and despair. The wind whipped her hair across her face. Her fingers were numb as she dug a quarter from her pocket. She looked at the black card, the silver number seeming to glow in the dim light. Her heart was hammering so hard it hurt. This was a choice. She was stepping off the edge of her world and into his. She put the coin in the slot. She dialed the number. It didn't ring. There was just a single, silent click. "Yes." His voice. Low, gravelly, and instantly recognizable. He didn't say hello. He said yes, as if he had been waiting for her call and no other. She had to lean her forehead against the cold metal of the phone booth. "Lorenzo?" A pause. The silence on the line was absolute, deeper than the city traffic. "Eliana, where are you?" "Someone broke in," she stammered, the words rushing out. "My ex-boyfriend, Travis, he took everything, my laptop, my phone, he broke my door. The police won't do anything." Another pause, this one shorter, colder. "Give me your address." She gave it to him. "Give me his name." Travis Barker. "Stay in your apartment. Lock what's left of the door. Do not leave. But the lock is broken. My men will be there in 1 hour. Do not open the door for anyone but them. Do you understand?" "Yeah," she whispered. The line went dead. She ran back to her apartment, her heart in her throat. She pushed a chair under the doorknob and sat on the floor, her back against the wall, knees to her chest. She watched the clock on the microwave. 58 minutes later, there was a knock. It wasn't a violent bang like Travis. It was a sharp, polite, 2-rap knock. "Miss Green, it is Rocco. Mr. Moretti sent us." She pulled the chair away and opened the door. Rocco and the other man were there. They looked impassive. They didn't look at the mess. They only looked at her. "Are you harmed?" Rocco asked. "No. I'm just the one who took my things. The laptop and the phone. Yes, we know." Rocco looked at his watch. "We are handling it. A locksmith and a carpenter will be here in 20 minutes to secure the door. They will work for us. Do not pay them." "But Travis, what are you?" Rocco's gaze was not unkind, but it was final. "You will not be seeing Mr. Barker again, Mr. Moretti gave his word. That is all." They left. Eliana was alone again, but the air in the room had changed. The fear was gone, replaced by a vibrating, terrifying sense of anticipation. The locksmith came, a quiet man who fixed the jam and installed a new, heavy steel deadbolt. He didn't speak to her, just nodded and left. She slept on the floor, wrapped in her coat. The next afternoon, she was at work, running on fumes, when a courier in a crisp uniform walked into the diner. He carried a small, sleek, black box. "Eliana Green?" He handed her the box and a clipboard. She signed. She opened it in the break room. Inside, nestled in foam, was a new phone, the newest model. Expensive and black. She turned it on. The screen lit up. There was only one number in the contacts. Lorenzo. She stared at it. It was a leash. It was a lifeline. She didn't know which. She called him after her shift, from the bus stop. "Hello," she said, her voice small. "It is done," he said, his voice a low rumble. "He won't come near you again." "What did you do?" "I secured a debt. Eliana, that is all. He was found trespassing on one of my properties. He was convinced to leave the state. Your laptop was unfortunately damaged in his haste, but your photographs were recovered. They will be delivered to you." She closed her eyes. She didn't want to know. She knew he was lying, and she knew he was telling the truth. Travis was gone, beaten up, terrified, and gone. She felt a wave of relief so profound it made her sick. "I want to thank you," she said. "It is not necessary. Yes, it is. I want to, in person. She needed to see him, to understand the man who could move the world with a single phone call. The line was quiet. My car will be outside your apartment in an hour. This time, she went home first. She changed out of her uniform and into her only nice pair of black pants and a faded blue sweater. She brushed her hair. She looked at herself in the cracked bathroom mirror. She looked tired, poor, and scared. But she wasn't the same woman she was yesterday. The penthouse was exactly as she remembered, silent, vast, and looking down on the world. Lorenzo was waiting for her, standing by the wall of glass. He looked better. The scar on his temple was healing, fading from angry red to a pale pink. He wore dark trousers and a soft gray sweater. He had dismissed his guards. They were alone. You didn't have to come, he said. Yes, I did. Thank you. Lorenzo, for the phone, for everything. He nodded, accepting it. He gestured to the kitchen, a massive expanse of marble and steel. Wine? She nodded. He poured 2 glasses of red so dark it was almost black. He handed one to her. His fingers brushed hers. It was like a small, static shock. They didn't sit at the formal dining table. They stood by the island, the city lights spreading out below them. You should not be living there, he said. It was a simple statement of fact. It's all I can afford. Since then, Liam... He watched her over the rim of his glass. Tell me about him. Your brother. No one had asked her that. Not in months. People avoided the subject, as if grief were contagious. She started to talk. She told him about Liam, about his stupid jokes, his love of old movies, the way he always took care of her even though she was the older one. She told him about the sickness, the endless hospital bills, the insurance that was a lie, and the horrible, septic powerlessness of watching him die by inches. Lorenzo listened. He did not interrupt. He just listened, his dark eyes never leaving her face. He was a perfect container for her grief. When she finished, her voice thick, she wiped a tear from her cheek. I'm sorry. I shouldn't. You don't care about that. I do, he said, his voice quiet. I lost a sister. Elena, she was 19. Eliana looked up, shocked. What happened? She was in the wrong place, with the wrong person. Someone who was an enemy of my father's. He looked away from her, out at the city. His jaw was a hard line. I was supposed to be watching her that night. I was young. I was stupid. I went to a meeting. I was late. He looked back at her. The pain in his eyes was so old and so deep it stunned her. It was the same pain she carried, just a different shape. I was not there, he said. I will not fail to protect someone again. Eliana understood. She was not just a donor to him. She was given a second chance. The air in the room was too thick. She felt the pull again. That strange, dangerous current. I think I need some air. She slid open the heavy glass door to the balcony. The wind was fierce at this height, cutting and cold. It whipped her hair back from her face and stole her breath. She gripped the railing, the cold metal biting into her palms. The city was a galaxy of sound and light at her feet. She heard him step out behind her. He didn't bring her a coat. He just stood beside her, a dark, solid presence in the screaming wind. They stood in silence for a long time. The wind tangled her hair, whipping it across her face, stinging her eyes. You are cold, he said. I'm fine. He moved, not toward the door, but toward her. He was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, slowly, as if not to spook her. He raised his hand. His movements were deliberate, precise. He didn't touch her skin. He just gathered the strands of her hair that were flying in her face, his fingers brushing her temple, tucking the hair behind her ear. His hand lingered, his thumb resting for a bare second on the curve of her cheekbone. She turned her head to look at him. He was so close. She could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the exact texture of his skin. His gaze was intense, searching, holding her completely still. He was not asking a question. He was waiting for an answer. She didn't move away. She didn't breathe. He leaned in. The last few inches were agonizingly slow. His lips brushed hers, a tentative, feather-light question. It was just a touch. warm and impossibly soft. Eliana's eyes fluttered shut. A small sound escaped her, half sigh, half sob. Her hand came up, not to push him away, but to rest on his chest, her fingers clutching the soft cashmere of his sweater. It was all the invitation he needed. His other hand came up, his palm cupping the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair. He tilted her chin up, and this time, his mouth claimed hers. It was no longer tentative. It was urgent. It was a kiss full of the grief they shared, the violence he held back, and the desperate, aching loneliness she had lived with for so long. His lips were firm, demanding, and she met his urgency with her own. It was too much. The height, the wind, the power of him. It was overwhelming. She was drowning. She pulled back, breathless, her hands pushing lightly against his chest. "I can't," she whispered, her voice shaking. She was confused. She wanted this, and it terrified her. Lorenzo's eyes were black. His pupils dilated. His chest was rising and falling heavily. His jaw was tight, his control absolute, but she could feel the tremor in the hand he still had tangled in her hair. "I have to go," she said, embarrassed, turning away from him. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" She fled, pulling the balcony door open and walking quickly, almost running, to the elevator. "Eliana!" His voice stopped her. She turned. He had not moved from the balcony. He was a silhouette against the city lights. "I am not Travis Barker," he said, his voice flat. "I will not take what is not given." He let her go. He watched the elevator doors close, his fists clenched at his sides, his jaw set so hard it ached. He was still on the balcony when Rocco entered, 2 hours later. "Boss," Rocco said, his voice clipped. "We have a problem. The Valenkos. They know about the blood donor." Lorenzo turned slowly from the glass. "What do they know?" "They know she's AB negative. They're calling her your savior. They think she's your only weakness." Lorenzo's face was stone. "And?" Rocco hesitated. "And our source inside their organization. He says the leak is not just a rumor. It's real. It's inside your own family. And they are actively targeting Eliana Green." The new phone was a cold, smooth stone in Eliana's pocket. It felt alien. Her old, cracked phone had been a part of her. This new one was a symbol of her connection to Lorenzo, a connection she had run from after that night on the balcony. She went back to the diner, back to the clatter of plates and the smell of coffee. But everything was different. Every customer who lingered too long, every car that idled by the curb, made her jump. The world felt thin, as if she could see the danger moving just beneath its surface. She was wiping down the counter after the lunch rush when the new phone buzzed. She had not given the number to anyone. She pulled it out, her hands damp. A text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have saved him." Eliana's blood turned to ice. She stared at the words, her breath catching in her throat. It was a sick joke. It had to be. Some kid who had spoofed her number. She deleted it, her thumb shaking, and tried to put it out of her mind. But the next day, a second message came. The blood debt must be paid, in full. This was not a joke. This was a threat. She felt a cold dread settle in her stomach, a feeling she hadn't had since the darkest days of Liam's sickness. She didn't reply. She didn't know who to tell. She couldn't call Lorenzo. Calling him would make it real. It would be an admission that she was tangled in his world for good. She tried to pretend it wasn't happening. She focused on the eviction, on the dwindling number of days she had left. She worked a double shift, her body aching with exhaustion, and stumbled home long after midnight. Her apartment building was silent. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs, her feet heavy. As she reached her landing, she saw it. Her mailbox, number 3B, was ajar. She never got mail this late. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and pulled the small metal door open. Inside, there was not a letter, but a small, white box, a gift box, like one for a piece of jewelry. It was wrapped in a simple black ribbon. She took it out. It was light. She walked to her apartment door, fumbled with the new, heavy deadbolt, and stepped inside. She locked the door, leaning against it, her heart pounding. She sat at her tiny kitchen table and looked at the box. Maybe it was from Lorenzo, an apology, a gift. She pulled the ribbon. It fell away. She lifted the lid. Inside, on a bed of white cotton, was a dead rat. Its neck was broken, its body limp. Taped to its fur was a small, neatly folded note. "He's next!" Eliana screamed. It was not a loud sound. It was a choked, horrified gasp. She threw the box across the room. It hit the wall, and the small, gray body tumbled onto the floor. She scrambled back, tipping her chair over, crab-walking away until her back hit the cabinets. She stared at it, the tiny, lifeless form, the note. "He's next." They weren't threatening her. They were threatening Lorenzo, and they were doing it through her. She ripped the new phone from her pocket. Her fingers were so numb she could barely unlock it. She hit the single contact. Lorenzo. He picked up on the first ring, his voice low and awake. "Eliana, oh God, in my mailbox," she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a hysterical rush. "A box. There was a rat, a dead rat. Lorenzo. It said the note said, 'He's next.'" The line was silent, but it was a heavy, coiling silence. She could hear him breathing, a single, controlled inhale. "Where are you?" he asked. His voice was dead calm. It was the calm of a storm's eye, a place where all the surrounding violence was held in perfect, terrible balance. "My apartment. I'm in my apartment." "Pack a bag, one bag, your essentials." "The photographs of your brother? Leave everything else. Rocco is 5 minutes away. He will knock 3 times. Do not open the door for anyone else." I can't. Eliana, pack the bag now." The line went dead. She was mechanical. She grabbed her backpack, stuffed in 2 changes of clothes, her toothbrush, and the small, framed photos of Liam she had rescued from Travis's destruction. She was zipping the bag when the knock came. 3 sharp, distinct raps. She opened the door. Rocco stood there, his face impassive. His eyes flicked past her to the dead rat on the floor, then back to her. "Miss Green, I can't do this," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I don't belong in this. This is your world, not mine." Rocco's expression softened, but only fractionally. "You are in this world, Miss Green. You have been since you walked into that blood lab. You saved his life. They see you as his property, or worse, his heart." He removed the backpack from her nerveless fingers. "Come, the car is running." She didn't look back at the apartment. She didn't look at the rat. She just followed him, a ghost in her own life. The penthouse was just as she remembered, but it felt different. It was no longer a place of awe. It was a fortress. The air was thick with tension. Lorenzo was standing by the window, his back to her, a phone pressed to his ear. He was not in a sweater. He was in a sharp suit, the jacket off, his white shirt stark against the night sky. "I don't care what it costs," he said into the phone, his voice a low, lethal command. "I want his operation crippled by morning. I want him to know this was a mistake." He hung up and turned as she entered. He looked at her, his eyes sweeping over her, checking for injuries, his gaze lingering on her tear-stained face. "You will stay here," he said. It was not a request. "You will not leave this apartment. One of my men will be outside the elevator at all times. The housekeeper, Maria, will get you whatever you need." The shock was fading, replaced by a surge of defiant anger. "I'm not your prisoner. Lorenzo." He walked toward her, stopping just a few feet away. "You are my guest," he said, his voice hard. "But if you walk out that door, you are a prisoner of the Valenkos. They sent you that gift. It was a message to me. They will not be so poetic next time. Here, you're safe. This is temporary, until I finish this." And so, she became a resident of the gilded cage. The days blurred, the penthouse was silent, suffocating. Maria, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, brought her meals on a tray, smiling sadly at her. A man in a dark suit stood perpetually by the elevator, never speaking, never moving. Lorenzo was a phantom. He was in his office, a room she was not invited to enter, on endless, angry phone calls. Or he was gone for hours, returning late, his face grim, the smell of cold night air clinging to him. He respected her space. He was polite, almost distant, as if the kiss on the balcony, the night he'd saved her from Travis, had never happened. He slept in his own room, down a separate hall. But she felt his presence. She felt his eyes on her when she read a book on the massive white sofa. She was safe, and she was suffocating. She had nothing to do but think about Liam, about the life she had lost, about the man who now held her life in his hands. One night, sleep was impossible. The silence of the penthouse was louder than the city traffic. She padded into the vast kitchen, the cold marble floor shocking her bare feet. She poured a glass of water, her hand shaking. She looked at her reflection in the dark. Floor-to-ceiling window. A pale ghost looked back, trapped against the glittering, diamond-sharp lights of Chicago. It all hit her at once. The loss, the fear, the crushing, awful unfairness of it all. Liam was dead. He had died because they were poor, because his insurance was a scam, because the world was hard and cold, and here she was, standing in a palace of marble and glass, a prisoner of a man who commanded armies, who could have saved Liam with a snap of his fingers. The dam broke. She leaned against the counter and wept. She pressed her fist to her mouth, trying to muffle the sound, but the sobs were too big. They tore out of her, ragged and raw, for her brother, for her stolen, simple life, for the innocence she would never get back. The kitchen light flicked on, flooding the room, making her wince. Lorenzo stood in the doorway. He was in nothing but a pair of black drawstring pants, his feet bare. His chest was broad, his skin tanned, a faint map of old scars visible in the harsh light. He looked unguarded, his hair messy from sleep. He had been drawn by the sound. He saw her body shaking, her face buried in her hands. He didn't say, "Don't cry," and he didn't say, "It's okay." He just walked to her, took the glass of water from her shaking hand, and set it down. He stood in front of her, a solid, warm presence. "He shouldn't have died," she choked out, the words she had never said to anyone. It wasn't fair. I had to watch him just fade, and all this," she gestured weakly at the opulent kitchen, "all this wealth, and I couldn't save him. I couldn't do anything." He moved. Then, he pulled her against him. It was not a gentle, hesitant embrace. It was a hard, grounding, absolute hold. His arms were steel bands around her, one hand splayed across her back, the other cradling the back of her head, pressing her face into the warm, bare skin of his chest. She fought it for a second, then collapsed against him, her hands fisting in the waistband of his pants, her sobs muffling against his shoulder. He just held her. He was solid as a mountain, absorbing her grief, her rage, her despair. He said nothing, and he just held her. Finally, her crying subsided into shuddering breaths. She was still clutching him, her face damp, her breathing ragged. She was profoundly, intimately aware of him, the solid muscle of his chest, the warmth of his skin, his clean, masculine scent. She felt the steady, slow beat of his heart under her ear. She tilted her head back, wiping her face. She had to look at him. His eyes were black, his expression unreadable, but his gaze was locked on her mouth. He lowered his head. His lips found hers. It was not like the balcony, hesitant and questioning. This was raw, fueled by her pain and his own tightly leashed fury. It was a desperate, claiming kiss. He tasted of himself, and of a loneliness that matched her own. A small sound, half gasp, half surrender, escaped her. His hand tightened at the small of her back, and he lifted her as if she weighed nothing, seating her on the cold marble counter without ever breaking the kiss. She gasped at the sudden cold, and he used it, his mouth dominating hers, her legs, of their own accord, wrapped around his waist, pulling him closer. Her fingers tangled in his thick, dark hair, holding him to her. This was not a plea. This was a demand. His other hand traced the line of her jaw, his lips moving from her mouth, down her throat, finding the pulse that hammered there. She arched into his touch, a shiver running through her that had nothing to do with the cold. This was oblivion. This was a fire that could burn away the fear, the grief. He found the sensitive skin just below her ear, his teeth grazing her lightly, and her entire body tensed. It was too much, too fast, the reality of who he was, what he did, what he was capable of, flooded her senses. This wasn't comfortable. This was consumption. This was a man who lived in violence, and he was kissing her like he owned her. She put her hands flat on his shoulders. Her body went stiff. "Lorenzo, wait," she breathed. "Please, I can't." He froze. His entire body became rigid. His breath was hot on her neck. She could feel the violent tremor in his arms, the sheer, animalistic control he was exerting to stop himself. He pulled back, just enough to look at her. His eyes were black with arousal. His jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped. He rested his forehead against hers, his breathing harsh and uneven. She could feel the heat rolling off him. "I'll wait," he whispered, his voice rough. She stared at him, confused. "I'll wait," he repeated, pulling back further, "until you are sure. Until you are not running from grief and not running from fear." His hands, which had been so possessive, now gently, steadily, grasped her waist and set her back on her feet. He stepped back, putting an acre of cold marble between them. The next day, the tension in the penthouse was different. It was no longer cold and suffocating. It was electric, charged. She watched him. She saw the way his eyes followed her when she crossed the room. She was falling for him, and it terrified her. He was a monster. He was her protector. He was both. That evening, Maria served them dinner at the massive formal table. Lorenzo was in a suit again. They ate in silence. The only sound the clink of silver on porcelain. Eliana couldn't stand it. She had to know. She put her fork down. "How many?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He looked up, his gaze sharp, assessing. "How many? What? Eliana? How many people?" Her voice was stronger now. "How many people have you hurt? To get all this? To protect this?" He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He didn't lie. He held her gaze, his own as clear and cold as the night. "To protect my family? To secure my business?" he said, his voice even. "I stopped counting a long time ago." His honesty was a physical blow. It was worse than any lie, a lie she could have dismissed, fought against. The truth, delivered so calmly, confirmed everything. She was sitting across from a killer, a man who had held her while she cried, a man who had promised to wait for her. She felt sick. "Excuse me," she whispered. She stood, her chair scraping on the floor, and left the table. She walked to the great wall of glass in the living room, wrapping her arms around herself. The city lights were a cold, blurry taunt. What am I doing here? She was in love with a monster. She touched the cool, thick glass, feeling the trapped vibration of the city, a sound like a sharp, sudden crack split the air. In front of her face, the glass didn't shatter, it exploded. A spiderweb of fractures raced outward from a perfectly round, dark hole. It was just inches from where her head had been. She didn't even have time to scream. She heard a primal roar from behind her. Down. Lorenzo moved faster than she thought humanly possible. He crossed the vast room in a blur, his suit jacket flying open. He hit her like a force of nature, his shoulder connecting with her ribs, his body shielding hers, wrapping her up as they crashed to the hard marble floor. Shards of safety glass rained down on them, tinkling like ice. He was over her, a human shield, his body heavy and solid. "Are you hit?" he yelled, his voice a raw command. "Eliana, are you hit?" She was shaking, gasping for air. The wind knocked out of her. No, I don't think so." Rocco and two other guards burst into the room from the elevator, guns drawn, fanning out, surrounding them. Lorenzo's face, inches from hers, was a mask of pure, cold fury. It was the most terrifying expression she had ever seen. He looked at Rocco, his voice a low, lethal whisper that cut through the chaos, silencing the ringing in her ears. "Get her to the safe room, now!" He looked at his other men, his eyes like chips of ice. "No more warnings. Find out who gave the order. I don't care who you have to burn. Find them." The penthouse safe room was not a room. It was a vault, a seamless cube of gray steel hidden behind a false library wall. Eliana sat on a narrow cot, her knees drawn to her chest, the echo of the sniper's shot still ringing in her ears. Lorenzo was not in the room with her. He was outside, a caged tiger. his voice a low, furious rumble that even the steel door could not fully contain. He was giving orders, and the city was burning. 2 hours later, Rocco opened the door. "It's time to go, Miss Green." "Go where?" "Somewhere safer. The car's in the garage." The journey was a blur of silent tension. She was in the back of the same armored sedan, Lorenzo beside her. He had not spoken a word to her since he'd tackled her to the floor. He just sat, his jaw set, staring out the reinforced window as the city lights gave way to the black, empty highways of the countryside. They drove for nearly 3 hours, turning onto a private, unlit road and passing through a checkpoint manned by men with assault rifles. The house was not a house. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. A sprawling stone and glass structure set in the middle of a dark, dense forest. It was beautiful, isolated, and completely terrifying. "We will stay here for a few days," Lorenzo said, his voice flat as he walked her inside. The vast main room was warm, a fire blazing in a hearth tall enough to stand in. "A retreat, until I handle the situation in Chicago." Eliana knew a cage when she saw one. "A retreat," she repeated, her voice hollow. "Or a prison." He turned to her, his face exhausted. The fury from the penthouse banked into a cold, hard weariness. "This is the most secure property I own. Eliana, the walls are reinforced. The glass is ballistic. There are 50 of my best men on the perimeter. No one can get to you here. No one but you." His eyes held hers. "No one but me." The first 2 days were a silent war. They were alone. The staff, a terrified married couple, served meals and disappeared. Lorenzo was constantly on his secure phone, his voice a low, angry buzz from behind the closed doors of a study. Eliana felt like a ghost, wandering the cavernous, empty rooms. She was safe, and she was utterly trapped. On the third afternoon, she found the piano. It was a black grand sitting in a glass-walled room that overlooked the woods. She hadn't played in years, not since before Liam got sick. She sat down, her fingers hesitating over the keys. She began to play, a simple, melancholy piece she remembered from her childhood. The notes were rusty, but the melody was pure, a thread of sad, simple beauty in the sterile fortress. She didn't hear him enter. When she finished, the final note hanging in the air, she saw him standing in the doorway. He was just watching her, his expression unguarded, unreadable. "I didn't know you played," he said. Not really." She lowered her hands from the keys. He walked into the room, his gaze lingering on the piano. "My sister, Elena, she played beautifully." He touched a high C key, the single note striking the silence. "I'll keep it tuned." That night, the silence at dinner was different. It was no longer angry, it was aware. "You can't cook, can you?" she said, pushing the perfectly prepared, catered food around her plate. He looked up, surprised. "What?" "Cook, with fire. Food." A shadow of a smile touched his lips. "I have not had the need." "Tomorrow," she said, a challenge in her voice. "You're going to cook. For me." He stared at her. Then, to her utter shock, he nodded. "Fine." The next evening, the kitchen was a disaster. He stood in the magnificent stainless steel room, wearing a borrowed apron, a look of profound concentration on his face as he stared at a pan of sizzling garlic. "It's browning," she said, trying not to laugh. "It's supposed to brown," he growled. "Lorenzo, it's black. It's on fire." He cursed, pulling the pan off the heat, a plume of acrid smoke filling the air. He looked at the smoking wreckage of the pasta sauce, then at her. She was biting her lip, her shoulders shaking. "It is not funny. Eliana." She let out the laugh, a real, bright sound that shocked them both. "It's terrible. You're terrible at this." He looked at the pan, then at his own blackened hands, and a low, rusty sound rumbled in his chest. It was a chuckle. He was laughing. "It seems I am." They ate cereal for dinner, sitting on the kitchen counter like teenagers, their feet dangling. She saw him then. The man behind the reputation. The man who missed his sister, who couldn't cook, who was trying so hard to protect her that he was forgetting how to be human. The next day, they walked in the woods. 2 guards followed, 100 yards back, their black forms moving like shadows among the trees. The air was cold, smelling of pine and damp earth. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly. "You could be in Chicago, running your war. Rocco could watch me." He stopped, picking up a flat stone and sending it skipping across a creek. "The war is being handled, and Rocco is not the one they're trying to provoke." He looked at her. "They almost killed you. I almost got you killed. I will not leave you again." That night, the storm came. It was not a gentle rain. It was a violent, lashing assault. The wind howled, and the rain hammered against the ballistic glass. Eliana lay in her massive bed, the sound of the thunder like artillery fire. She couldn't sleep. The house felt too big, too empty. She patted down the dark hall. His bedroom door was open, the bed untouched. She found him on the main patio, standing in the heart of the storm. He was soaked to the skin, his black shirt and trousers plastered to his body, the rain streaming from his hair. He was staring into the black, wind-torn woods, a statue of pure, self-inflicted misery. She slid the heavy glass door open, the wind ripping it from her hand and slamming it against the wall. "Lorenzo!" she screamed over the gale. He didn't turn. She ran out into the rain, the cold hitting her like a slap. "What are you doing? Are you insane? Get inside!" "You should have let me die on that table, Lydia," he said. His voice was dead, swallowed by the storm. "Your life would be yours. You would be free." "I don't want to be free if I'm dead," she yelled, grabbing his arm. He was like marble, cold and unmoving. "The bullet missed. Lorenzo, I'm alive, but you won't be if you stand out here all night." "This is my fault," he ground out, finally turning to face her. His eyes were dark, haunted pits of guilt. "That bullet, the rat, Travis, everything, I put this on you. I brought this filth into your life. And you're the one keeping me safe from it," she cried, her hands fisting the front of his wet shirt. "You can't protect me if you're dead. Now come inside." She pulled him, her entire body straining. He was a dead weight, lost in his own guilt. "Lorenzo, please." Her plea broke the spell. He looked at her, soaked and shaking, her thin nightgown transparent, her face pale in the flashes of lightning. He let her lead him, his heavy, waterlogged steps following hers. She dragged him into the master bathroom, a room of steam and marble. She grabbed a thick white towel from the warmer and threw it at his chest. "Dry off," she commanded. He just stood there, dripping, his eyes fixed on her. "Damn it," she muttered. She took the towel and began to dry his face, her movements rough, angry. She scrubbed at his hair, his neck, his shoulders. "You're a child, a big, stupid, guilty child, pacing in the rain." "What good does that do?" Her anger softened as she worked, her hands slowed, her touch becoming gentle. She was drying his face, her thumbs brushing the water from his scarred temple. He was just letting her. His guard was completely down. He looked broken, lost. "Eliana," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He captured her wrist, his hand cold from the rain. "I'm here," she said, her voice dropping. He looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers, seeing past the fear, past the anger, to the woman who had laughed over burnt eggs. "I told you I would wait," he rasped. She held his gaze, her heart hammering in time with the storm outside. She brought her free hand up to his face, her palm resting against his cheek. His skin was cold, but he was warming under her touch. "I'm tired of waiting," she whispered. "I'm tired of being afraid." He didn't move. He was giving her every chance to escape. She leaned in, and she kissed him. It was a kiss of salt and rain and surrender. He didn't take, he received. His hands came up to her waist, his grip hesitant, as if she were made of glass. She pressed closer, deepening the kiss, telling him with her body what she was too afraid to say with words. "I'm here. I choose this." A low groan rumbled in his chest. His control broke, his arms banded around her, lifting her off her feet, his mouth claiming hers with a desperate, pent-up hunger. He didn't carry her to the bed. He carried her against the wall, his body caging hers, his lips moving from her mouth to her jaw, to the pulse that hammered in her throat. "You're sure?" he breathed against her skin. It was not a question. It was a final, desperate plea. I'm sure, she gasped. Every movement was deliberate. It was not the desperate fumbling of the kitchen. It was a slow, emotional claim. He laid her on the bed, the room lit only by the frantic, silent flashes of lightning. His eyes never left hers as he slowly, reverently, peeled the wet nightgown from her skin. His hands explored her as if he were a blind man reading a secret, his touch tracing her collarbone, her ribs, the curve of her hip. Her breath caught in her throat, a sharp, aching sound. She was not a victim. She was not a prisoner. In this room, she was his equal. She unfastened the buttons of his wet shirt, her fingers brushing the hard muscle of his chest. He was beautiful, a creature of scars and power, and he was hers. When they finally came together, it was a collision of two solitudes. It was slow and deep and overwhelmingly emotional. He moved with a restrained power that made her entire body tremble. His eyes locked on hers, watching every flicker of pleasure, every hitch in her breath. She wrapped herself around him, holding on as the storm inside finally broke. They fell asleep entangled, her head on his chest, his arms locked around her, the rain lashing against the windows, unable to touch them. She woke to sunlight streaming into the room. The storm was over. She was warm, her body held securely against his. She turned her head. He was awake, watching her. The darkness, the guilt, was gone from his eyes. There was just a quiet, profound peace. He smiled, a small, real smile. "Good morning," he whispered. "Good morning." He kissed her, a slow, deep, morning kiss. "Stay here. I have an idea." She heard him in the kitchen, the sounds of cabinets opening, a pan clattering. 10 minutes later, a familiar, acrid smell wafted down the hall. She found him in the kitchen, shirtless, wearing his rain-soaked pants from last night, frowning at a pan of utterly blackened eggs. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "Again, Lorenzo? You murdered them. You're a breakfast assassin." He turned, a wooden spoon in his hand, and he laughed, a real, unrestrained laugh that lit up his entire face. "I am a monster." "The worst," she said, laughing with him. The sound was so new, so bright, it felt like a miracle. The joy lasted exactly 4 minutes. It was shattered by the shrill, encrypted ring of his satellite phone. He snatched it up, his face instantly transforming. The laughter, the peace vanished. The boss was back. Yes, he listened, his body going rigid. "Where? No. Do not bring him to the city. Bring him here, to the barn. Now." He hung up and looked at her. "Get dressed. Stay in the main house. Do not, under any circumstances, go outside." "Lorenzo, what is it?" "We found him," he said, his voice flat and cold as ice. "We found the mole." She watched from the living room window. A black SUV pulled up. Rocco and 2 other men dragged a young man out. He was terrified, pleading, his face bruised. Eliana recognized him. He was young, maybe 20. She'd seen him in a photograph in Lorenzo's study, his arm slung over a younger Lorenzo's shoulder. They dragged him into the large, separate barn used for equipment storage. Lorenzo followed, his face carved from stone. The barn doors slid shut. Eliana sat for hours, staring at those doors. She heard nothing. There were no screams. That, somehow, was worse. Just before sunset, Lorenzo returned. He walked into the living room, his clothes unchanged, but his hands, she saw him washing them in the kitchen sink, scrubbing them raw. "It was Antonio," he said, his back to her. "My father's brother's son. My cousin." Eliana felt sick. "He's just a kid," Lorenzo said, his voice hollow. "The Valenkos found out he had gambling debts. They paid them. They owned him." He turned to her, his eyes dead. "He confessed everything." He walked over to her, his movements stiff. "The plan wasn't just to warn me. The sniper was a test, to see how I would react, where I would take you." He cupped her face, his hands still cold. "The plan is to kidnap you. Eliana, to take you. They know I will tear the city apart to find you. They want to break me, mentally, physically, and they were going to use you to do it." The world tilted. The next morning, the estate was no longer a retreat. It was an armed camp. Guards were visible. patrolling in pairs, semi-automatic weapons held openly. The house was locked down. The beautiful, peaceful cage was now just a cage, the intimacy of their night, the laughter of the morning. It all evaporated under the harsh light of reality. Eliana felt it, a cold dread. She was the target. She was the liability. She found him in the study, staring at a satellite map of the estate's perimeter. "So this is my life now?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I'm the bait? I'm the thing everyone is hunting to get to you?" She wrapped her arms around herself. "Am I just your weakness now, Lorenzo?" He turned, his face a mask of cold fury. He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing her wrist. His grip was hard, not gentle, not meant to be. It was a chain, locking her to him. He forced her to look at him, his eyes burning into hers. "You are not my weakness, Eliana," he growled, his voice low and fierce. He pulled her hand, her entire arm, and pressed her palm flat against his chest, over his heart. "You are my reason. You are the only thing that is. You are my reason." The words echoed in the silence of the fortress. They were meant to be a comfort, a vow. But to Eliana, they sounded like a sentence. He was her reason for being hunted. He was her reason for being locked in this beautiful, sterile cage. The love, the passion, the laughter they had shared, it was all now just a part of the trap. War was no longer a threat. It was a reality. The estate transformed from a safe house into a command center. Men with hard eyes and earpieces moved through the halls. Rocco was a permanent fixture, his laptop open on the massive dining table, which was now covered in maps and surveillance feeds. The house hummed with a low, electric tension, the quiet, efficient thrum of a machine being tuned for violence. Lorenzo was no longer the man who had laughed at burnt eggs or held her while she cried. He was the boss. He was a general, moving his pieces on the board, his voice a low, cold monotone on encrypted calls. He was preparing to tear Dmitry Valenko's organization apart, root and stem. He was also a man haunted. He watched her constantly. He would stand in the doorway of the living room while she tried to read, his gaze so heavy it felt like a physical weight. He would join her for meals, but the man who sat across from her was a stranger, his mind miles away, calculating risk, planning attacks. The tenderness was gone, replaced by a possessive, suffocating protection. He had given her a gift the day after the sniper attack, before they left the city. A simple, delicate silver bracelet. "So I always know you are safe, for why?" he'd said, fastening the clasp. It was light on her wrist, but now it felt like a manacle. She knew what it was, a tracker. She lasted 3 days in this new, cold reality. 3 days of watching him plan a war in her name. On the 4th night, she found him in the study, staring at a feed from a drone that was circling high above a Valenko warehouse in the city. "I can't do this. Lorenzo," she said, her voice quiet but shaking with a cold, hard anger she hadn't known she possessed. He didn't turn. "You don't have to do anything, Eliana. You just have to stay safe. I will handle this. Handle this." She stepped into the room, her hands clenched. "This is not handled. This is my life, and you've taken it. I'm not a person anymore. I'm a target. I'm your reason. I'm the thing you hide in a box while you go and hurt people." He turned slowly. His face was a mask of exhaustion and control. "I am doing this to protect you. You're not protecting me. You're imprisoning me," she cried, the words finally breaking free. "I want my life back." "Your life?" he scoffed, a single, bitter sound. "The life where your ex-boyfriend kicked in your door? Where were you 1 shift away from being homeless? Where were you getting death threats in the mail? That is the life you want?" "Yes," she shouted, jabbing a finger at him. "Yes, because it was mine. It was poor, and it was hard, and it was dangerous, but I was free. I made my own choices. I was not your prisoner. I was not the cause of a war. I don't want this. Lorenzo, I don't want your men and your guns and your blood money. I want to go home." The silence that followed was absolute. He stared at her, his expression unreadable, but she saw the flicker of deep, profound hurt in his eyes. He had offered her his entire world, his protection, his heart, and she was throwing it back in his face. There is no home to go back to, he said, his voice dangerously soft. Dmitry Valenko knows your name. He knows your face. He knows where you lived. You walk out that door. You are dead before you reach the main road. Then let me be dead, she sobbed, the anger breaking, revealing the raw terror beneath. At least I'd be free. I can't live like this. I can't be the woman who caused all this. I don't want to be your weakness. He crossed the room, his movements slow, deliberate. He didn't grab her. He didn't yell. He stood in front of her, his hands at his sides, his shoulders slumped. The general was gone. It was just the man, broken and pleading. Do not say that, he whispered. Please, just wait. Give me time. I am setting a trap for him. I'm planning a decoy mission tonight to draw his forces out of the city. I am hitting 3 of his warehouses. It will draw his attention. It will cripple him. When he is weak, when he is reeling, I will end this. I will end him. He raised his hands, his fingers brushing her arms. Just stay with me. A few more days, until it is safe. That is all I ask. Then if you still want to leave, I will let you go. I will give you a new life. Anywhere you want. I will let you go. She saw the cost of his words. She saw what it took for him to say them. She was his reason, and he was offering to let her go. She nodded, a single, jerky motion. A few more days, she whispered, until it's safe. Until it's safe, he repeated, relief washing over his face. He pulled her into a hard, desperate hug. It will be over soon. Mia cara, I promise. That night, the house was a hive of activity. Lorenzo was in the command center, the dining room, with Rocco and a team of specialists. The decoy mission was launched in 1 hour. He was sending a large portion of his men, a visible, aggressive force, to strike the warehouses in Chicago. It was a show of strength, designed to make Dmitry panic, to make him pull his best men back to the city to protect his assets. You stay in the master suite, Lorenzo commanded, kissing her hard. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. The perimeter is on high alert, but you are safest there. Be careful, she whispered, clinging to his shirt. I am not going. I am running the assault from here, he said. This is my trap. I will not be in it. He left, and she locked the heavy oak door. She sat on the edge of the bed, the silver bracelet on her wrist feeling impossibly cold. The house was quiet, too quiet. The hum of the command center was on the other side of the estate, insulated by stone and distance. She heard a faint pop, like a champagne cork, far away, then another pop, pop. It was a sound she shouldn't be hearing. It was the sound of silenced weapons, and it was coming from inside the perimeter. She jumped up, her heart leaping into her throat. She ran to the door, her ear pressed against it. She heard nothing but the pounding of her own blood. Then she heard footsteps. Heavy, running footsteps, coming down the hall. Lorenzo, she called out, her hand on the doorknob. The doorknob turned. She scrambled back. The lock, which she had engaged, clicked. A metallic thunk, and the heavy door swung open. A man in black tactical gear stood there, a silenced pistol in his hand. He wasn't one of Lorenzo's. The insignia on his shoulder was a 2-headed eagle. Valenko! She screamed, a high, thin sound. He lunged for her. He was fast, professional. He clamped a gloved hand over her mouth, his other arm banding around her waist like steel. She fought, kicking, biting at his glove. A sharp pain bloomed in her neck, a needle prick. The world dissolved, turning instantly to black. Lorenzo stared at the feed. The decoy mission was a success. 2 of the warehouses were burning, but Rocco, his face pale, was holding an earpiece to his own ear. Boss, Rocco said, his voice strained. We have a problem. The perimeter just went dark. All 24 men in the west sector. Their trackers are dead. No communication. Lorenzo's blood ran cold. The decoy wasn't Antonio. He told them. He didn't wait for an answer. He was running. He ran from the command center, down the long marble hall to the master suite, his gun in his hand. He didn't need to hear the silence. He already knew. He slammed into the door, finding it wide open. The room was empty. The bed was undisturbed. The window to the patio was shattered, on the floor. Just inside the broken glass lay a single, bloody scarf. It was the one she had worn on their walk in the woods. He picked it up. The blood was still wet. A sound, inhuman and raw, tore from his throat. It was not a yell. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated agony. He had failed. He had locked her in a room and told her she was safe, while he walked into a trap that was set for him. He turned, a hurricane of rage. He swept the lamp from the bedside table, sending it crashing into the wall. He tore the framed pictures from the dresser. His hands bleeding from the broken glass, he roared her name, a desperate, broken sound. "Eliana!" Rocco and his men found him standing in the wreckage of the room, clutching the scarf, his body shaking with a fury so profound it was silent. "Get me the tracker," Lorenzo whispered, his voice a venomous hiss. "Get me the signal from her bracelet, now. Find her, or by God, every man in this room will die before the sun comes up." Eliana woke to the smell of rust and stale water. Her head was pounding, a thick, drug-induced hangover. She was sitting, her wrists and ankles tied to a heavy metal chair. Her arms were raw from the rope. She was in a vast, dark space. The only light came from a few bare bulbs hanging from a steel girder ceiling, casting long, sick yellow shadows. A warehouse. "Ah, the angel is awake." A man stepped out of the shadows. He was tall, with pale, almost translucent skin, and blonde hair slicked back from a high forehead. He was handsome in a cruel, sharp way. He wore an immaculate, expensive suit. This was Dmitri Valenko. "Lorenzo is occupied," Dmitri said, circling her chair like a shark. "He sent his dogs to bark at my door, while I walked into his house and took his prize." He crouched in front of her, his pale blue eyes clinical, curious. "He thinks you are his angel, his savior, the woman who carries his blood. I must admit, I am disappointed. You are very plain." Eliana's head was throbbing, but her mind was clearing, fueled by a sharp, cold terror. Dmitri smiled. "He killed my cousin. Did he tell you that? A business dispute. He has grown arrogant. He thinks he is untouchable. He needs to learn. He needs to feel pain. And you—" He reached out, tracing her jaw with a single, manicured finger. "You are his pain." She recoiled from his touch, her skin crawling. "We will wait," Dmitri said, standing up and brushing his hands. "He will come. He will come alone, or he will come with his army. It does not matter. He will come, and he will beg, and then I will kill you in front of him." He looked at her, his head tilted. "Let's see if angels bleed." Eliana stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt the rope on her wrists, the cold of the warehouse. She thought of Lorenzo's face, the way he laughed at the burnt eggs. She thought of his promise. "I knew you'd come." Her fear coalesced into a single, burning point of defiance. She spat in his face. The action was so unexpected, so sudden, that Dmitri froze. A glob of saliva ran down his pale, perfect cheek. His blue eyes widened, then narrowed into slits of pure, reptilian hatred. He didn't move. He just nodded to one of his guards, a mountain of a man standing nearby. "Teach her, but do not break her. I want her to be able to scream." The guard stepped forward and backhanded her. The blow was brutal, snapping her head to the side, exploding a starburst of white-hot pain across her cheek. Her lip split, and she tasted the metallic tang of her own blood. She gasped, her vision swimming, tears of pain stinging her eyes, but she did not scream. She turned her head back, her chin high, and stared at Dmitri, her eyes blazing with a hate that matched his own. She would not scream. She knew he would come. Lorenzo stared at the red, pulsing dot on the tactical tablet, the warehouse, an abandoned shipping depot by the river. It was the worst possible tactical location. One way in, one way out, a perfect kill box. "Boss," Rocco said, his voice grim. "It's a trap. He wants you to come. He has the high ground. He'll have snipers." "He has Eliana," Lorenzo said, his voice dead. He was loading a magazine, his movements fluid, precise. He was no longer the raging man from the bedroom. He was a surgeon. He was dead. "We go in hard. We go in fast. No quarter, no survivors," Lorenzo said, chambering around. "Rocco, you take the east wall. I'm going through the front. Kill everything that is not her." The assault was not a battle. It was a detonation. Two black SUVs, driving without lights, slammed through the chain-link fence. Before the guards on the roof could even register the breach, they were dead, taken out by Rocco's snipers. Lorenzo kicked open the main warehouse door. It was chaos. Gunfire erupted from everywhere. The sound, a deafening, physical thing that shook the metal walls. Lorenzo didn't duck. He moved forward, his pistol in one hand, a submachine gun in the other, a whirlwind of controlled violence. He was a shadow, moving through the shadows, and every man he passed fell. He saw her. She was across the room, tied to the chair. Dimitri was behind her, using her as a human shield, a pistol to her temple. "Stop!" Dimitri screamed, his voice high and panicked. "Stop, or she dies now!" Lorenzo froze. The shooting stopped, replaced by a terrible, ringing silence. Lorenzo stood in the middle of the warehouse. His men fanned out behind him. "You are a fool, Lorenzo!" Dimitri yelled, his arm tight around Eliana's throat. "You came for her. You value this nothing more than your life. Let her go, Dimitri," Lorenzo said, his voice calm, his guns held at his sides. "I will let her go, in pieces." Dimitri laughed, a high, thin sound. "Watch, Lorenzo. Watch your reason die." He was just talking, buying time. Lorenzo saw the slight shift in his stance, the tightening of his grip. Eliana saw it too. She saw Lorenzo's eyes, locked on her. She saw the infinitesimal nod he gave her. She did the only thing she could. She threw her entire body weight backward, driving her head into Dimitri's face. It was not enough to stop him, but it was enough to surprise him. His head snapped back. His grip loosened. His shot went wild, the bullet screaming into the rafters. It was all the time Lorenzo needed. One shot. Not from Lorenzo, but from Rocco. On the far wall, the bullet took Dimitri in the side of the head. He collapsed, dead before he hit the floor. Silence. Eliana was shaking, staring at Dimitri's body. Lorenzo was moving. He dropped his guns, his hands shaking, trembling so violently he could barely function. He ran to her, pulling a knife from his boot. He cut the ropes on her wrists, his hands fumbling, nicking his own skin. "Eliana, Kara, look at me!" She looked up, her face bruised, her lips split. She was sobbing, great, gasping, silent sobs. As the last rope fell away, she launched herself out of the chair and into his arms. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms locking around his neck, burying her face against his throat. She was shaking, her whole body convulsing. He held her, his arms like steel, his face buried in her hair. He was shaking too, the killer, the boss, the man who had just stormed a warehouse. He was holding her, trembling like a child, murmuring her name over and over, his voice thick. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Rocco touched his shoulder. "Boss, we have to go. The police will be here in minutes." Lorenzo didn't let her go. He carried her, his arms locked around her, and walked out of the warehouse, his men forming a shield around them. He put her in the back of the armored sedan, climbing in beside her, pulling her onto his lap. He held her as the car tore away from the curb, the sirens wailing in the distance. She was still sobbing, her fingers clutching his jacket. He just held her, stroking her hair, kissing her temple. His own tears wet on her skin. After a long time, her sobs subsided. She was still tucked against his chest, his arms a fortress around her. She was safe. She was alive. She lifted her head, her bruised face pale in the flashing lights of the city. "I didn't scream," she whispered, her voice raw. "When he hit me, I didn't scream." He looked at her, his heart breaking. "I knew you'd come," she said. They did not go back to the country estate. Lorenzo took her home, to the penthouse, the fortress of glass that had once felt like a cage, now felt like the only safe harbor in the world. The massive, shattered window in the living room had already been replaced with a seamless pane of new glass, as if the sniper's bullet had been a bad dream. But it was not a dream. Eliana's body was a map of the kidnapping. Her face was a watercolor of purple and yellow bruises. Her split lip was swollen, and her wrists were raw and chafed from the ropes. A quiet, private doctor had seen her, his hands gentle, his eyes avoiding Lorenzo, who stood in the corner like a stone guardian. Eliana slept for 24 hours, a deep, exhausted, trauma-induced sleep. Lorenzo never left. The master bedroom, where they had made love, was her recovery room. But Lorenzo did not join her in the massive bed. When she woke, blurry and aching, she found him on the floor. He had not taken a pillow or a blanket. He had dragged a low, uncomfortable armchair from the living room, and when he'd inevitably fallen asleep, he had slumped out of it, his head resting on the hard edge of the chair's seat, his body angled awkwardly on the carpet. He was still in his clothes from the warehouse, his suit rumpled, his face gray with exhaustion. He was a man who commanded a city, who slept on floors made of marble, and he had chosen the hard, rough carpet to be near her. Her movement, a small wince as she sat up, woke him instantly. His head snapped up, his eyes wild and disoriented for a fraction of a second. The boss replaced by a man terrified he was still in the nightmare. "Eliana," he breathed, scrambling to his knees by the bedside. You're awake." She looked at him, the king of Chicago, on his knees, his hair a mess, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked broken. "Get up," she whispered, her voice a raw croak. He flinched, as if she had struck him. "I'm sorry. I'll get you water." "I'll get Maria." "No," she said. She shuffled over, her body screaming in protest, to the edge of the bed. She patted the mattress beside her. "Get up, here." He stared at the bed, then at her, as if she had asked him to levitate. "Lorenzo." "You're a fool," she whispered, her bruised lip making her smile lopsided. "Get in the bed." He moved slowly, as if uncertain, and sat on the edge. He was stiff, keeping a respectful distance. He was afraid to touch her. Eliana sighed. She did not have the strength for words. She simply leaned her body, bruised and broken, against his. She laid her head on his shoulder. He was rigid for a moment, a statue of surprise, and then, with an unsteady, shuddering breath, he melted. His arms came around her, his hold so gentle, so careful, as if she were made of spun glass. He did not pull her close. He simply held her, a living, breathing shield. She pulled him closer, her arms wrapping around his waist. They held each other in the silent, sunlit room, breathing the same air, their hearts beating in the same steady, grounding rhythm. They did not speak. There was nothing to say that their bodies were not already saying. Eliana healed, and as she did, Lorenzo worked. He did not leave the penthouse. He brought his war room to her. While she read on the sofa, her feet tucked beneath her, he and Rocco sat at the glass dining table, speaking in low, clipped tones. "The names," he said, his voice flat. "The ones she heard Dimitri say, the shipping container numbers. We found them." "Boss," Rocco said, his voice grim. "He was smarter than we thought. He wasn't just moving guns. He was moving federal bonds, millions, from the port of Antwerp." Eliana had heard the names in the warehouse, tied to the chair. She had listened to Dimitri on the phone, arrogant and boastful, listing his partners, his accounts, his shipments. She had thought it was just the rambling of a madman. She had repeated the nonsense words, the fragments of calls, to Lorenzo in the quiet hours of her recovery. To her, it was nonsense. To Lorenzo, it was a ledger. He did not retaliate with bullets. He did not send his men to burn warehouses. He made a single phone call to an old, quiet man in Washington. He did not give his name. He just gave the facts, the container numbers, the bank accounts in Zurich, the names of Dimitri's partners, who, it turned out, included a very prominent, very corrupt city councilman. Lorenzo Moretti was a gangster, but he was also a surgeon. He used the truth like a scalpel. He dismantled Dmitri Valenko's entire network, not with a war, but with a whisper. He exposed the rot, and he let the legitimate world, the world of the federal government, devour the corpse. It was this, the sheer scale of the implosion, that brought them two agents, a man and a woman, in drab, sensible suits. They were FBI. They did not come with a warrant, they came with an invitation. Maria let them in, and they sat on Lorenzo's white sofa, looking uncomfortable and small in the vast, sunlit room. Lorenzo sat across from them, in his own chair. Eliana sat beside him. He had not wanted her in the room, but she had insisted. "They are here because of me," she'd said. "I will not hide." "Miss Green," the female agent, Harris, began. She was all sharp angles and sharper eyes. "We know what you've been through. The kidnapping, it must have been traumatic." Eliana just nodded. "The men who took you were part of the Valenko organization, an organization that, thanks to a trove of anonymous tips, is now completely defunct. Its assets are frozen, its partners are being indicted." "That's good news," Eliana said quietly. "It is." The male agent, Childers, said, leaning forward. "But a man like Dmitry Valenko had partners. Dangerous men. Men who are now scrambling. Who are wondering what you know. What you heard in that warehouse." Lorenzo, who had been silent, spoke. His voice was a low, cold rumble. "She knows nothing." Agent Harris ignored him, her eyes fixed on Eliana. "We believe you are in extreme danger. Miss Green, these men are not like Mr. Moretti. They are not organized, they are sloppy, and they are desperate." "What do you want?" Eliana asked. "We are offering you a way out," Harris said, her voice softening. "A new life. The Witness Protection Program. We can have you on a plane in an hour. A new name, a new town, a new job, a safe, clean slate. No one will ever find you." Eliana looked at the agents. She saw the life they were offering. A small, beige-colored apartment in a city she didn't know. A job as a waitress. Probably. A life of looking over her shoulder. A life of nothing. A life without the man sitting next to her. She felt Lorenzo's hand on the arm of his chair, his fingers gripping the wood so hard his knuckles were white. He was furious. He was vibrating with a rage that was so potent. She could feel the heat of it. He wanted to throw these people from his home. He wanted to tell them that he was her protection, that he was her new life, but he said nothing. He was silent. He was waiting for her. He was letting her choose. Eliana looked back at Agent Harris. "A new life," she repeated. "Completely," Harris said, sensing a victory. "You would be free." Eliana stood up. The agent stood with her, expecting her to go and pack her bag. Lorenzo remained seated, a statue of carved stone, his eyes on the floor. He would not look at her. He could not bear to watch her go. "No, thank you," Eliana said. Harris's smile froze. "Miss Green, I don't think you understand." "I understand perfectly," Eliana said, her voice clear and strong. She had not known her own mind until this very second. "You are offering me a cage, a safe, clean, empty cage. I've been in a cage. I'm done with cages." She turned to Lorenzo. He looked up, his eyes wide, disbelieving, a fragile hope dawning on his face. "I'm not leaving," she said, speaking to him, to the agents, to the world. Agent Childers was sputtering. "But Mr. Moretti, he's the reason you're in danger," Eliana laughed. It was a clear, strong sound. "Mr. Moretti is the reason I am alive. He's the reason I am standing here." She walked to the agents, her hand extended. "Thank you for your offer. Maria will show you out." They left. Defeated and confused, their briefcases clutched in their hands, the elevator doors chimed, and they were gone. The penthouse was silent. Eliana turned to Lorenzo. He was still in his chair, unmoving, watching her as if she were a mirage, a vision he had conjured from his own desperate need. You stayed," he whispered. "I stayed," she said. She walked to him, kneeling on the floor in front of his chair. "Why?" he asked, his voice raw. "I am what they said. I am the danger. I am the reason that life was safe." "It wasn't life," she said. "It was just surviving. I'm done surviving. Lorenzo." She looked at him, at the man who had slept on her floor, who had let her go, who had been willing to lose her forever rather than imprison her. She took his hand. "You are going to let me go. I will not make you a prisoner. Eliana, I will not be the man who takes your choices. If you want to go, I will set you up. I will protect you. From a distance," he choked out, the words costing him everything. "Lorenzo," she said, her voice soft. "My old life is gone. Travis, the diner, the debt, it's all gone. And your old life, the one where you were alone, the one of pure revenge, that's gone, too. You have a choice. We can be new together." She saw the tears well in his eyes, the man of iron undone. "You gave up your enemies for me," she whispered, her voice thick. "You could have destroyed them with your own hands, but you gave them to the law. You gave up your war. I won't disappear from you." He took her hand, the one he was holding, and brought it to his chest. He pressed her palm flat against his shirt, placing it directly over his heart. She could feel the strong, steady, frantic beat beneath her hand. "You saved my blood," he said, his voice cracking. "But you did not just save my blood. Eliana, now you carry my life." He pulled her up, his mouth finding hers. It was not a kiss of passion, or grief, or desperation. It was a kiss of profound, staggering relief. It was a kiss of coming home. That night, they did not fall into bed. They found each other. It was not a storm. It was a slow, quiet dawn. In the bedroom, lit only by the 1,000 lights of the city they had both claimed, there was no fear. There was no hesitation. His hands, the hands that had taken lives, were unspeakably gentle. He undressed her slowly, his eyes locked on hers, worshipping every inch of her, the bruises, the scars, the paleness of her skin. He kissed her split lip, so softly she barely felt it. He kissed the raw skin on her wrists. He kissed the scar on her arm from the coffee pot, the first day, the day it all began, and she, in turn, touched him with a trust that was absolute. Her fingers traced the healed scar on his temple, the old, faded scars on his chest. She was not afraid of his past. She was not afraid of who he was. When they came together, it was a quiet, intimate vow. It was a promise made not in words, but in the language of a shared, steady breath. It was two broken, lonely people, a mafia boss and a waitress, finding a home in each other. Their eyes locked, their bodies finally, truly in peace. They fell asleep tangled in the sheets, his heart beating against her back. 6 months later, the Liam Green Foundation for Patient Aid held its first inaugural gala. The ballroom of the fanciest hotel in Chicago was filled with the city's elite. Doctors, hospital administrators, philanthropists, and city officials. At the podium, speaking with a calm, clear, and confident voice, was Eliana Green. She was not in a waitress uniform. She was in a simple, elegant dark blue gown, her hair up, the silver bracelet on her wrist the only jewelry she wore. She spoke of her brother, of the failure of the system, and of the new foundation, funded by a massive anonymous endowment that would ensure no one would die or lose their home because of medical debt. As she finished, the applause was thunderous. She smiled, a real, radiant smile, her eyes scanning the crowd. A ripple went through the room. A space had cleared at the back, by the main doors. Lorenzo Moretti stood there, dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. He was not smiling. He just watched her, his pride, his devotion, a tangible, physical force in the room. Whispers erupted. "Is that him?" "They say he's the one who funded it." "They say she was his." He walked through the crowd. The whispers died as he passed. The city's most powerful men and women parted for him like the sea. He walked directly to the podium, not taking his eyes off her. He reached the stage, took her hand, and kissed it, bowing his head to her in a gesture of pure, public respect. He did not care about the whispers. He did not care about the crowd. He only had eyes for her, later. As the gala was winding down, he pulled her aside into the shadow of a terrace overlooking the city. "You were incredible," he murmured, his voice low, for her alone. "We were incredible," she corrected, smiling, leaning her head against his chest. "We're doing good. Lorenzo, you are doing good," he said. He tilted her chin up, his gaze intense, his love for her so bright it almost hurt to see. "You saved me. You, with your good heart and your AB negative blood." He kissed her, a deep, promising kiss, right there in the open for the whole city to see if they dared to look. He pulled back, his lips brushing hers as he murmured the words that were his new and final truth. "I lived because of your blood. Now I live for you." Thank you for listening to this story. We hope it captured your heart. We love hearing from you. So please, Let us know in the comments where you're listening from. It's always amazing to see how far our stories travel. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories, for more tales of passion, danger, and love. And finally, what did you think of Lorenzo and Eliana's journey? Share your thoughts in English. We read every one.